Wuthering Heights was originally published in 1847, and it really centres around two different families, the Lintons and the Earnshaws. When the story begins, it's many years later than the story that it goes back in time and tells us. So there's a man called Mr. Lockwood, and he is renting a place called the Grange, and the landlord of the Grange is someone called Heathcliff, and Heathcliff lives this very reclusive life in Wuthering Heights. So that's how our story begins. There then is a snowstorm, and Mr. Lockwood ends up having to stay the night at Wuthering Heights, and he's haunted. Someone is shouting, "Let me in." He also starts reading these journals, and they're from this woman called Kathy. And then the next day he goes back to the Grange, and he asks his housekeeper, Miss Dean, "Do you know anything about Heathcliff?" Heathcliff is living up there with his nephew and with his daughter-in-law, but Heathcliff's son is dead. What is going on with everyone there? Everyone seems really miserable at Wuthering Heights. And Miss Dean says, "I know the whole story, let me tell you." So the whole story is told by mainly Miss Dean. It does go a little bit into Mr. Lockwood, but very small amounts. The majority of it is Miss Dean, who is also known as Nellie. So Nellie says there was a family who lived at Wuthering Heights, and they were called the Earnshaws, and they had a child called Catherine, who was known as Kathy, Hindley, and Francis, but really it's Kathy and Hindley who we're focusing on. So those two siblings lived there. One day their father brought home a child and named that child Heathcliff. Now, we don't know where this child really came from. The child is described as being gypsy and has dark features and is very mocked when he gets there. So he's this poor young boy who the father treats as his own and treats really well. And Heathcliff actually becomes the father's favourite child. But Kathy's kind of quite teasing, although she does then form a friendship with Heathcliff, and they go out into the moors and they run around like these wild creatures. The father then dies, and the whole thing goes to Henley. He gets the estate, and he makes Kathy and Heathcliff basically work in the house of Wuthering Heights. He doesn't like them. They're an inconvenience to him. He doesn't want them in the house. He also has his own bride who he brings to the house, and takes over Wuthering Heights. Now, whilst Kathy and Heathcliff are roaming about, Kathy is described as being 12 years old at the time. Heathcliff is a little bit older than her. They then go over to the Grange because their days are basically just running around the moors, doing whatever they want. They're supposed to be doing chores, but when they don't do chores, they get beaten, but they don't care because their life is so cruel anyway. So they go over to the Grange, and they're looking in the window to see what this family are like. And there are two children over there, and they are the Lintons. So they're very important to the story as well. You've got Edgar and Isabella, who are brother and sister, and they're kind of a bit spoilt, the children. They live in the Grange in this really nice house. And as they are spying on them, Kathy and Heathcliff, when they go to run away, Kathy gets trapped by a dog, and the dog bites her. So she has to be taken into the Lintons' house. They're all very scared of Heathcliff. There's a lot of racism towards him, that his dark features scare them all. And so they're all kind of repelled by him, repulsed by him. So they throw him out of the house. But they keep 12-year-old Kathy because they realise she is an Earnshaw and that she has been injured by their dog, and they feel really bad about it. She then ends up staying there for 3 weeks, and they turn her into a lady. And that's not really in the story at all. It just says she returned 3 weeks later wearing white gloves, acting like a lady. Whereas before that, she'd been this wild child who was running on the moors, who was one with nature. Now 3 weeks with them, all of a sudden she's a lady. Okay, so she comes back, and Heathcliff really doesn't recognise her at all. And he asks Nellie, and let me just say, Nellie is a very unreliable narrator throughout the whole thing. She's trying to paint herself as the most perfect person because she's telling Mr. Lockwood, who she is now housekeeper to, this story. She wants to make herself out seem as perfect. So Heathcliff comes to Nellie and basically says, "Can you make me look more proper? Because then Kathy might like me." And you see this romance blossoming between the two of them. Really, between Heathcliff is very obsessed with Kathy. It's not really a love story. It's just he's very obsessed with her. But then you also have the Lintons, and the Lintons have a boy, Edgar, and they would like Edgar to marry Kathy, and Kathy is fine with that, with marrying Edgar. So whilst Heathcliff is talking to Nellie, he then goes and sits outside, and then Kathy comes over to Nellie and says, I need to confess something to you. I need to talk to you right now. But she doesn't realise that Heathcliff is listening because Nellie, the snake, doesn't tell her. So she has no idea. So then she says, I can never lower myself to marry Heathcliff. He at that point runs away, and Kathy doesn't know that he's overheard. Nellie doesn't set the record straight at all. And what she goes on to say is, we would be penniless. He has no money, I have no money. I have to marry Edgar Linton for the money. And Edgar's kind of fine. He's very nice. He really likes Kathy. He's fine. So she's going to marry him, but then she's going to use the money to help bring Heathcliff's status up. But Heathcliff just wants to marry Kathy, but she thinks that's a good idea. But Heathcliff obviously didn't hear the rest of the conversation, so he runs off. She then gets married. Then Heathcliff pops back up. Quite a while has passed, and he pops back up, and then they kind of get their friendship back together, the two of them. But obviously by now she is married to Edgar, and then her and Edgar are living at the Grange. Her brother still has Wuthering Heights. His wife dies in childbirth, and then Heathcliff ends up marrying Edgar's sister, Isabella. And Isabella, I think, is the most innocent out of them all. They're all kind of evil. They're all miserable. They all love bringing misery upon everyone's house. But I felt Isabella out of them all was actually quite pure because she really did like Heathcliff. She just liked him. Even though everyone was being like quite racist towards him throughout the book, that's like a big theme of it. A lot of prejudice towards him. He doesn't have money in his own name or anything. She just really loved him. So she ends up with him living in Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff then makes her life hell. Really torturous existence is she goes on to live with Heathcliff. Kathy is with Edgar. Kathy then dies after giving birth to a daughter called Catherine. Isabella runs away from Heathcliff and ends up having a son who she names Linton. So Linton then goes to live with Heathcliff, and Edgar is raising obviously his daughter Catherine. Heathcliff then comes up with this diabolical plan, and this is in volume 2 because the book is set over 2 volumes. He is going to get his son Linton to marry Edgar and Kathy's son, Catherine, because it would just destroy Edgar. And then he'll own everything, Heathcliff as well, so he'll kind of own Edgar. And obviously Edgar married the love of his life, Kathy. Although I don't feel anyone's in love. I feel like they're all meant to be poisonous and just nasty people. So anyway, because he didn't get his way, he didn't marry Kathy, he's going to ruin these 2 young people's lives. One of them being his own son, and he is who he wanted to marry, Kathy's daughter. So that ends up happening. You can see it happening because he tells Nellie, and so you know the story is unfolding. Obviously, volume 2 is like a lot of back and forth. It's basically Nellie acting like, I was trying to save her. I was trying to keep her away from Linton. And then we had to keep this from her father. Whereas if she had told the father, Edgar, then it wouldn't have got into this mess. But anyway. And then Heathcliff is just wanting this romance to really unfold. There's then also like another boy who's there, who is Kathy's nephew, who has ended up living with Heathcliff, and Heathcliff is ruined. He's decided not to educate the boy and to make him a brute, but that boy is actually really nice. Deep within his character, he is a nice person, unlike the others within the story, but he is completely uneducated, so he can't really do anything in life, and he's decided to destroy this boy on purpose. It's really about revenge, possession, ruining someone to such a level of revenge that actually ruins yourself, and you'd ruin your own child just to get back at someone. That's really what the whole story is. It's in no way a love story. There is moments of haunting, but it's not really got a huge amount of haunting, but there are good moments within it of the haunting, especially right at the beginning, Mr. Lockwood going to stay at Wuthering Heights, and he stays in, and then he can hear someone outside the window scream. That's a great haunting moment at the beginning. That's what got me. I was hooked, but then that doesn't really continue throughout the novel. Anyway, obviously the plan goes ahead. Linton is always sick, so he dies, and we know he's going to die anyway. So he dies. He doesn't end up having a child with Catherine before he dies, and Catherine just goes into the custody of Heathcliff. Everything Linton left was to Heathcliff. So unless Catherine can marry someone else, really she is just trapped. And they're all just trapped in this house. There's a really unpleasant character called Joseph, who is very religious and he's like a manservant within it. And he's just being hateful towards everyone. Nellie's acting like a saint because she's telling you the story. I thought it was dreadful. I was trying to save everyone. But then I was also kind of meddling, kind of stirring throughout the whole thing as well. And when you're first reading it, you'll think you're on Nellie's side. But then as it goes through, you're like, actually, she's not as innocent as I thought she was. So then at the end of the story, Heathcliff dies. Linton's dead, obviously. So who's left at Wuthering Heights is Joseph. Edgar's dead. Everyone's dead. So you have Joseph, and then you also have Kathy's nephew, Henley, I believe. And then you have Catherine. So then those two are like, let's get married. Even though she's mocked him throughout the whole story because he can't read, let's get married. Because then we'll have Wuthering Heights together and that'll kind of be it. And I thought Mr. Lockwood might end up with Catherine. I thought at one point he was going to ask Catherine, but no, Nellie was like, I want these two to be together. So God knows if they were together in the end or not, because it's just Nellie saying they're due to get married on New Year's Day. But then we never get to New Year's Day. The book ends. So God knows. Maybe they were not going to get married and Nellie just said that because she thought, oh, Catherine could be happy with Mr. Lockwood. Let me put a stop to that. We could finally have some joy. Wuthering Heights, which is this Gothic building that really everyone who steps foot into Wuthering Heights gets destroyed. So it's almost like the house itself is this evil entity within the story. So there could be Mr. Lockwood could come. Nah, let's not do that. But then I did feel they probably would be happy in Wuthering Heights. The nephew, obviously they're cousins. There's a lot of incest. It's a classic. Let's be honest. There's a lot of incest because obviously there's the incest between Heathcliff isn't related to Cathy, but he's raised as her brother. Odd. So there's that. And then obviously, of course, Catherine and Linton are cousins and they do marry. Okay. And then you have another set of cousins. At the end, are they going to get married? You just have to put that to a side. That's not really a part of the story. It's just kind of the time, isn't it, of like that kind of class of people. They're all marrying their cousins. I just had to put that like aside really to get on with the story. I personally really enjoyed the story. I feel like it talks about loads of different subjects. So it's about like classism, it's about racism, it's about love turning into possession. It was never really love, it was actually possession within it. I loved at the end that it said Heathcliff and Cathy, basically implies they walk along the moors haunting everyone. I thought that was like a fitting end to it when Heathcliff died at the end, and it was just left to its own devices at the end that maybe these two are going to get married and live at Wuthering, who knows. And then they're going to live at the Grange and the Wuthering Heights. Joseph is going to live there by himself and shut up all the houses in Wuthering Heights, all the rooms. And so it was just a lot. Everyone was miserable. That's the one takeaway I would say. It's misery. It's no love story. Everyone is upset with everyone. Everyone is miserable. It's also about how like vengeance for rightful vengeance. So Heathcliff was right to try and get revenge on everyone because he was mistreated because of the way in which he looked, because he was darker skinned than everyone else. That racism was mistreatment to him. So you are kind of on his side in volume 1. And then in volume 2, you're like, oh no, he's going to destroy his son and destroy himself to get revenge. It's kind of how revenge becomes obsession, but the whole thing is obsession because I don't think Cathy was ever in love with Heathcliff. I don't think they were in love. I think it was just this possessive thing, and she had all the control because she was marrying Edgar for his money and then going to keep Heathcliff single. She didn't want him to marry Isabella, even though she'd already married Edgar. Like, she didn't want Heathcliff to marry anyone. So I thought she was very possessive towards Heathcliff, that like, I'll help you financially, but you'll just stay here as my little pet. And I actually have a husband who I'm going to have children with, but you'll just be my little pet over here. This lighting is very fitting for Wuthering Heights. The dark, cold Yorkshire moors. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I feel like there are so many topics within it that you could talk about, loads of different strains of conversation that go on within the actual book itself. How unreliable this narrator is, because Nellie is really trying to make herself out to Mr. Lockwood that she just saw everything was terrible and I was trying to help and but really she was kind of stirring throughout the whole thing. And then the bit at the end when she said, I said to Heathcliff, you haven't been good since the age of 13, because Heathcliff as a child was very nice. All three of them, Henley's that saying? Catherine and Heathcliff got measles, and the two were really mean to Nellie and Heathcliff was really nice. So she talks about that, how Heathcliff was a really loving child, really grateful, loving child, and he was the nicest of the three, but now he's turned out destroying everyone. That's what he wants. Also, when he's opening up coffins, I'm sorry. Like, after Kathy has died, she's buried. And then Edgar, his wish is to be buried with Kathy. That's his wife. And Heathcliff, like, pays the man who's doing it to open up the coffin for him so he can see Catherine's face. So he can see how she's aged with time in her death. Like, years have passed. And then he says she's untouched. She's completely, like, as I left her, which obviously is, like, she wouldn't be. But, like, he's like, she was completely the same as she was before. Very creepy bit. Loved that. Loved the creepiness of that. And the little boy on the moor at the end, and his animals won't cross the moor. And then he's like, what are you doing? Why won't you walk across the moor? And he's like, no, there's Heathcliff's there on the moor, but Heathcliff's dead. Oh, I loved the little haunting bits like that. So good. Loved them. But yeah, Nellie was just playing games for me personally. She was all over the place. But at the end, when she says, I said to Heathcliff, you haven't been good since you were 13. You're a sinner. Da, 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 da. That was obviously like, she never said that to Heathcliff in a million years. He would have cast her from the house. That would have been it. She's very scared of Heathcliff. So I loved how she was adding her own things within it that you knew she wouldn't have said within the story, but she's such an unreliable narrator. I loved that element of that so much. And also that she just hated Kathy from the get-go, really. She hated Kathy as a child, so then you couldn't really trust anything she'd said about Kathy, but she loved Catherine, Kathy's daughter, so again, you couldn't really trust anything. There was such bias. Really enjoyed Wuthering Heights. Really interesting book. I feel like it's a book that as time goes on, I'll have more and more to kind of say about it and different points to make about it. Very interesting book. It's pitch black outside. That's the perfect time to end the Wuthering Heights review. Tell me if you have read it, what you thought about it, and I will see you again soon for another video.